Ground beef gets treated like the side character of meats, but today it's giving main character energy, because this is boring made better.
I've got raw beef in my shirt pocket.
Now, usually ground beef is for stuffing tacos and gym bros, which there's nothing wrong with that, but today we're using it in 3 different ways that will undoubtedly tickle your fancy. Your fancy will be tickled. Now, first up, we have Mongolian beef, which has the least amount of prep and the least amount of ingredients. So it's the least, but still delicious. We're gonna start with a couple cloves of garlic and a ton of garlic skin. And we just want those roughly chopped. Nothing too big, nothing too small. Alternatively, you could use a garlic press, but that's gonna make it really small, which is fine. It's not going to ruin it, but I like a little bit more chunky garlic in my Mongolian beef. But honestly, it's really about whatever makes it easiest for you to cook. Then once we have that all nice and chopped, we're gonna move it to the side. And now for our ginger, you could very easily just scrape down the sides and run it over a microplane, but for stuff like this, I like to do something that's a little more wasteful because it works really well, but it is wasteful. So cutting off about a 1/2 inch knob, nothing too much. And then I'm just going to cut it down, removing the skin. You could alternatively just still strip it down with a spoon, but it's such a pain in the butt. Then I'm just gonna lay it flat and cut these into nice thin discs, making sure I'm cutting against the grain. And you'll know if you're cutting against the grain because if it's standing upright like this, right? Cut this way. Grains are going this way, you cut this way. Then once you have these nice thin discs, you'll just go ahead and take a bench scraper, place it over top, and give it a great smack. And just like that, it's all nicely broken up. And all you have to do is just run your knife through it a couple times. And it should look nice and beautiful. Next up, we will thinly slice some green onions. Those are gonna go in at the end. We're not gonna end up cooking those down because in this case, we want them to stay very fresh and very light. So all we'll need to do is just cut them on a nice bias so they're nice and beautiful, like you. And then last up, which is totally optional, and if you want to do it, great. If you don't, also great. That's totally fine. Thai chili peppers. They're very spicy. You don't have to use them. I think it's nice. You grab a few of them, just like this. Nothing too big. We'll do 3. 3 is a solid number. Technically, it's an odd number. But just a few of these guys to add another layer of flavor and help spice up the whole thing. But again, you absolutely do not have to do this. It is 100% optional. Don't do it if you don't like spicy. Because at the end of the day, you want to enjoy this thing. So if you don't like spicy, then don't make it spicy. And I'm just going to cut these into little chunks, just so that way later on, when I bite into this, some bites will be real spicy, some bites won't be real spicy. It'll be a nice game of roulette. Now for our sauce, we're going pretty simple here. Nothing too complicated, but still, if you wanted to simplify it even more, you absolutely could. But for today, 3 tablespoons of light soy sauce, a tablespoon of oyster sauce. One of these days, I'm gonna move this to a squeeze bottle. It's not today, but eventually. A tablespoon of Shaoxing cooking wine. And if you don't have this, you can use dry sherry, very similar, or you could just leave it out. You could also use rice vinegar too, but that'll change the way it tastes, but it'll still be good. It'll just be a little different. Then we're going in with 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, and you can absolutely sub this for something like honey or other sort of sweetener that you want to use, but I really enjoy brown sugar. And lastly, we're just going to do a little bit of white pepper. Just mix that up and get the sugar mostly dissolved. If you really wanted to be a stink about it, you could do this on the stove, but it's not worth the effort. And then boom, no more prep. Now the beef that we're going to be using for this recipe is 93.7, which just means that it's 93% lean and 7% fat, which is different from what we're going to be using in our other 2 recipes today for one specific reason. And that is because we are going to be building our sauce in our pan, which means that any excess fat that we have sitting in our pan is going to end up in our sauce. And for this recipe, we really don't want that. We're gonna go ahead and start by adding in some beef tallow because we wanna make sure that our meat gets a nice sear and doesn't stick. And if you don't have beef tallow, that's totally okay. You can just use a neutral oil if you want. It's going to do the same thing. Then after our pan has been preheated to a nice medium high, you're gonna lay in your meat. And then I like to use a spoon to just immediately go and press down my ground beef because I wanna make sure I'm getting as much contact as possible so that way I get the best sear possible. And you really wanna make sure your pan is adequately preheated because what you're doing right now, adding this cold meat into your pan, is you're going to drop the temperature of your pan. So if it's not preheated really well, you're just gonna end up steaming your meat rather than searing, and that's just gross. Now we'll just go ahead and add in a nice pinch of salt. So we wanna make sure that our beef tastes beefy. And then after about 2 minutes, you should start to be able to flip it over and see that you develop some nice color there. And then you can go ahead and just start to flip and break up all of the meat. Now, because we're using a leaner meat, we dry it out. So as soon as you start to break it up, we're gonna add in our garlic, chilies, and ginger. And then you'll just keep that moving so you don't burn any of that garlic and you don't dry out any of your meat. And you can choose to break this up really as much as you want. If you like small pieces of meat, great, go to town on this thing. But if you like bigger chunks of meat, that's fine too. Just leave it a little bit more whole. And then after about another 2 minutes, our beef is nice and cooked through. And we're gonna go ahead and add in our sauce. Make sure you keep all that moving so nothing burns and those sugars caramelize nice and evenly. And then after about another minute to minute and a half, all of that meat should have absorbed all that sauce. And then you can go ahead and kill your heat, give it a little taste, make sure it's good. Doesn't need any more salt. Depending on if you salted your beef or not, or if you're using a low sodium soy sauce or anything else like that, you may want to add salt at the end just to make sure it's appropriately salted. But in my case, it's good to go. All we need to do is toss in our green onions. plate that up on a nice bed of rice and finish it with just a touch of sesame seeds. Next up, we have one that falls a little bit more into the unknown, Japanese hamburger. Not hamburger, hamburger. It's sort of like a Salisbury steak or a meatball, but in my opinion, it's much, much better. And it all starts right here. You're gonna start by very finely dicing half a yellow sweet onion, or just a yellow onion if that's what you have. We want this as small as it can be because it's going to end up in our burger patty and we don't want chunks of onion in our burger patty. And because of that, I'm actually going to individually cut each one of these onion rings. This is definitely going to take a little bit longer than if I just chopped it all up, but I think it yields a better result. So if you're following along and you pulled your onion apart, start by laying one of them flat, push it down, and then we're just gonna go ahead and cut this into nice thin strips. Then we'll just take those thin strips, we'll rotate them, and we'll give those a nice fine dice. This is also a great time to practice those knife skills I taught you in my 10 tips video. Shameless plug. You should go watch that after this one. Then in a nice hot skillet, we're just gonna go ahead and add in a little bit of beef fat or neutral oil if you just wanna use that, followed by our onions. Now we'll just give those a little pinch of salt, and then we're gonna cook these down until they're nice and caramelized and soft. Now I'm realizing that I had said caramelized. That's the wrong word to use. You do not need to sit over this and caramelize these down. You don't need to do that. This has been going for about 10 minutes. This is plenty good. You just want to make sure that it's nice and soft, it's got a little bit of color, and you're good to go. Then you can just move those back into that bowl from whence they came. Make sure you get them all, and then we will continue to build our hamburger. And then we will just set this pan aside because we're going to need it later. Now into a large bowl, we're going to start by adding about half a cup of dried Japanese panko. This is different than breadcrumbs, so if you can, avoid using breadcrumbs. Panko has a lighter, fluffier, and crispier texture that's more airy and more chunk-like versus breadcrumbs, which are just crumbs. Then we'll add in about 3 tablespoons of milk, and we're just gonna mix that around to make sure that panko is nicely hydrated. Now, while that hydrates, let me tell you about the ground beef that we're using. 75-25, 75% lean, 25% fat. You could also do an 80-20. It's very similar. You're not gonna really notice a difference, but I would recommend making sure that your ground beef is quality. Don't get those chubs of ground beef from the grocery store, and instead go for something that is a better quality because it's going to give you a better result, plain and simple. So now we're just gonna go ahead and add in our pound of ground beef, followed by 1 egg, 2 tablespoons of Kewpie mayo, and for this, you really want to use Kewpie mayo, or I guess really just any Japanese mayo, because Japanese mayo uses more egg yolks than egg whites, so it's a richer and creamier result. Then we'll hit that with a nice pinch of salt, some black pepper, fresh cracked if you can, because fresh cracked is always better, and then those very lightly caramelized onions we made before that are now cooled down, because obviously you don't want to add the hot onions to your cold meat. It's going to be a mess. Now for this next part, I really and truly cannot recommend wearing gloves enough because you have to use your hands. This isn't one where you can get away with not using your hands. I mean, in theory, you could use a stand mixer, but eventually you're gonna have to shape them with your hands. So it's just better to start with your hands and use gloves. So we are just going to squish our meat with our fingers, making sure that everything is getting nicely incorporated. And I guess this is a good time to also tell you that technically speaking, this really isn't hamburger, because technically speaking, hamburger is made with usually a 3-to-1 ratio of beef to pork. But you know what? Still gonna taste freaking delicious. Now, once that meat is nicely worked, we are just going to want to split this into 4 even-sized patties. Now, however you want to do this, you can measure it out, you can weigh it. It's up to you. I'm not gonna be that specific. Ooh, or also you could just make one giant one. That would be pretty cool, but I'm not gonna do that. But if this video does well, then maybe I'll come back and do it. Who knows? Now, once you have these divided up, you're just gonna form them into a nice ball. And then the reason you have to use your hands is because you're going to throw it back and forth between your hands to get out any air bubbles. Then you have your option. You can fold it into a traditionally shaped hamburger style patty, or you can do this more like lopsided egg looking thing. Personally, I like the lopsided egg. But once you form the first, you're just gonna go ahead and move on to the second and repeat this until you've formed all your meat into patties. Now in the same pan that we grilled our onions, we're going to cook our burgers. So start by bringing this up to medium-high heat because we want to make sure we get a nice sear. Now once we're nice and hot, we're just going to go ahead and add in a little bit of beef fat. This is just to help us get that initial contact sear. And then we are just going to carefully lay in our patties, give them a nice good press. And then we're just going to let these cook for about 3 minutes until the bottoms are nice and seared. And then after those 3 minutes, you can use a nice bendy spatula to get under there and flip. Ooh, look at that. That's what you want. That right there is what you want. And that one is not what you want. I messed that one up. That one is a result of the sear not being seared enough. So really you want to make sure you wait until that sear is fully developed. Oh, okay. And then once they're all flipped, you want to give them another 3 to 4 minutes to sear on the second side. Perfect timing to wipe up any spills you may have made. You know, because I'm not alone here. Now after that time has passed and that second side is seared, you're just going to want to reduce your heat down to medium, a nice simmer, and then we're just going to add in about a half cup of beef stock, or beef broth. And then we'll just cover this and let this cook for about 5-6 minutes. Really depends on how thick you made your patties, but around that range. Now, once those are finished cooking, which I forgot to mention is also dependent on how you like your burgers cooked, you're just going to carefully remove them and place them on a tray. And then in all this goodness, we're just gonna go ahead and make our sauce. Now, arguably, I have a little too much fat in there. It's more than I would want, but that's okay. I'm just gonna roll with it. It'll work just fine. But if you used a leaner ground beef, you may wanna add in some butter here, but I'm gonna skip out on it. First up is 3 tablespoons of shoyu, then 3 tablespoons of ketchup, and 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire. And then we're just gonna wanna cook this down until it thickens up just a bit. And one of my favorite parts about making this is when I am tasting it to adjust if I need some salt, maybe a little sugar or something. Grab the little bits of the burger off the bottom to taste with. It's gonna be good. And then after about 3 to 4 minutes, or once that sauce has really started to thicken up, we're ready to plate. Now for these, you could absolutely serve them with rice, but personally I think since it's a heavier dish in general, it's nice to lighten it up with something like cabbage. Plus, who doesn't love to make a giant mess? A little bit of dressing, then we'll just lay on our patties, and then we'll just pour over our sauce. And for our last dish, we're making kefta, or kofta, or kafta. I'm not 100% sure. The internet was zero help into the correct pronunciation. So if you know, please let me know. But either way, it starts with a food processor. You don't have to use a food processor, but it just makes the whole process easier. And into that food processor, we're going in with half a red bell pepper, 3 cloves of garlic, if I can manage to break them off. Then we're gonna throw in a jalapeno, seeds and all. You can take the seeds out if you want. Then about 1/4 of a bundle of parsley, including the butts. Don't worry about them. It's all gonna get chopped up anyways. And then, do you remember this from earlier? Yeah, we're just gonna cut this up into quarters, just so it chops a little bit better. And we'll add those in as well. And then once you have all that stuff loaded into your food processor, you're just going to process. I should have cut my bell pepper up. Now I'm gonna reach in and grab my bell pepper that I should have broken up, and I'm just gonna tear it apart because didn't plan ahead. Actually, I just had a lot of faith in the food processor. Here we go. All right, and then once it's a very nice pulverized paste, we need to strain. We do this because we don't really want a ton of liquid added to our protein. So I'm just going to take a large bowl and a large sieve, and then I'm just going to scrape all of this out and run it through that sieve to remove any of that excess water or moisture. You could also just squeeze a cheesecloth around it, and that works too, but not everyone has a cheesecloth. I would assume more people have sieves than cheesecloths, but I may be wrong. If you have a cheesecloth and not a sieve, then just use a cheesecloth. And I'm just going to push this around because I want to get rid of all that excess water. Look at that vegetable water. Gross. I'm just using my spatula to squeeze the sides to get as much of that moisture out. And this can really just keep going because there's just a lot of moisture, especially from those onions. And I can tell it's working because I'm starting to cry from all that onion juice. Oh gosh, I hate this. And now once we've got all that excess moisture all squeezed out, we can go ahead and dump our liquid. And you could technically speaking use a new bowl, but then you've got another bowl to wash. So I'm just gonna put it back in the same bowl. And then into that, we're gonna add our 75-25 ground beef, along with 2 tablespoons of cumin, 2 tablespoons of ground coriander, half a teaspoon of turmeric, half a teaspoon of garam masala, and of course, salt and black pepper. Now again, I really hate to do this to you because we just did this before. Glove up, because you really need to work this one until it's like a sausage paste consistency. So just do it by hand. But if you gotta think about textures, I totally understand, 100% get it, just use a mixer. But if you are doing it by hand, you really wanna make sure you are grabbing and squeezing your meat so that way it's coming into a paste and it's really congealing. I don't think that's the right word. Now after about 2 to 3 minutes of really working your meat, we're gonna wanna throw this in the refrigerator for about 20 minutes just to chill back down because we spent all that time working it. And while that chills, preheat your oven to 400 degrees. And now you're gonna want to line a baking sheet with parchment paper. It does not have to be perfect. I just don't like a ton of overhang on mine, so I'm just going to fold it up. So that way it just fits a little nicer, you know? You got the time. This also feels like a really good time to tell you just how much I appreciate you guys. I really do. So thank you for watching these videos. Thank you for engaging, whether it's positive or negative, preferably positive, but it all helps. I really appreciate you guys. And now that our meat has rested and our oven is heated, it's time to spread it all out. Now, the best way to do this is with a glove, but since I've been using a glove a lot today, I won't. Instead, we'll just use a spatula, which works too, I guess. Whatever. Now, we're just going to move this over just like that. And then we're just going to press this down and form it out nice and flat. If you don't want to use your hands, totally understand. But I'm going to now flip this paper over, doesn't count as using glove, so it's not cheating. Now, you know what? You need a glove. We're gonna have to glove it. I'm sorry. It's been a very glove heavy day. I really apologize. It wasn't my intention, but I'm looking at this and I'm like, need to glove it. You just need to, sorry. Okay, now that we are gloved up, we're just going to press this out. We want to make sure that there are no cracks along any of the sides or worse, down the center, because if there are, you're gonna end up tearing your meat. We don't want to do that. So we're just going to mold this out nice and flat. We don't want our pieces too thin or too thick. We just want it to be one nice even layer, like this. Then, once you have this nice even layer, we're gonna remove our gloves, and then we are going to use a spatula to divide up our meat. It doesn't have to fully separate. This is just enough to divide it up once it's cooked. It'll pull itself apart as it cooks, but we're going about an inch, 3/4, nah, that's an inch. Yeah, about an inch thick, but feel free to go thicker, feel free to go thinner. The world is your oyster, or the world is your kefta. And now I'm just gonna take a spoon and I'm going to give it a little dense, give it a little bit of texture. You could have arguably done this with your finger when you were wearing your gloves, but you know, I took them off. So now I'm using a spoon, beautiful. And now that this is prepped and ready to go, we're gonna throw it into our oven, which has been preheating at 400 degrees for roughly 10 minutes, 10 to 12, maybe 10 to 15, depending on how thick you've made your koftas, depending on how thick your meat is. But the key here is you don't want to overcook them. Now granted, I'm using 75-25, so there's a lot of fat in here. Also another reason why I'm not spraying it. So it's going to stay really juicy throughout, but you still don't want to overcook them. So we're gonna take them 90% of the way there, and then we're going to throw it up to a broil for 1 to 2 minutes just to get a nice crisp on the top. Cool. And while that cooks, this is a perfect time to cut up any vegetables or really any toppings you want to have in your kefta. For me, half a red onion that I found in the back of my fridge. I don't want to be wasteful. Also, not the entire red onion because that would be ridiculous. I've also got a little bit of cucumber. This one was not lost in the back of my fridge, but I do feel like that is the fate of most cucumbers in the house. And lastly, I also have a little bit of tomato. This one I picked up from the grocery store because my wife likes tomatoes. But I'm going to hollow out the inside because nobody likes a wet, soggy tomato. It's gross. But everybody loves a nice salted tomato. And now that these are finished, very hot, we're gonna dust them with a little bit of fresh sumac and then just let these sit and rest for about 7 to 10 minutes. Then we'll just lay down a nice warm pita, brush on some of those juices, go on with a couple slabs of meat. I like tzatziki, but feel free to use whatever you want. And then we'll just hit it with all of our garnishes. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I really hope that you learned something. Here's a photo of me in high school, and I'll see you next week.